Hey guys, Matthew. In today's video, I'm going to be bringing you guys what I think is one of the best league starters for the upcoming 3.20 Forbidden Sanctum League. Now, before anything, I want to give credit where credit is due. This is a build and a guy that I've been working with for with this dude called Ckaiba on YouTube. He's one of the OGs of General Cry. He's actually before I made this build for the very first time, he was my inspiration. You may know him better from his in-game name or his in-game account. I'm bot Asher underscore feminist or something like that. He's one of the absolute juicers who makes a ton of currency from bossing without offering any services or something like that. So here's an example. Last league, you can see 3 months ago, last league he made 11 mirrors in the first week or two of the league playing the build that I'm going to be showcasing today. As you can see, 724 deaths, and he had 7 days of playtime. So I'm guessing this was about 2 weeks into the league or something like that, or he just played nonstop for a whole like one straight week, which is less likely. Anyways, I'm saying big thanks to him because he helped me with the POB, but also because we're going to use his content, his clips, in order to showcase what the build looks like in action, and also because he provided me with provided YouTube with a actual leveling run. So if you've never leveled a character like this, it's going to be a really good way to follow along. All right, and of course, all the leveling notes in the POB, we'll talk about that. So first off, let's just go and have a quick look at essentially what this build can do on a relatively small budget. So this is General Cry Blade Flurry Berserker on his day 2 gear. Now note that he is a very, very, very good player. His day 2 gear is probably not going to be your day 2 gear, but this is pretty affordable within the first few days of a league for a relatively advanced player. If you're a complete noob or a casual, whatever, this might take a week or two. But still, this is very affordable gear, as you'll see once we head into the POB portion of the video. So let's just go ahead and have a quick look at the last phase of a Maven here, so you can get a bit of an idea of the sort of damage it does. This is an Uber Maven, of course. So you'll see the sort of play style as well as the sort of damage that this build is capable of dishing out. So as you can see, this was an Uber Maven final phase. Yes, it's not like a build that is going to be, insta-phasing Maven the same way that my other build did that I made a video about yesterday or 2 days ago, but this build is going to be capable of doing literally everything in the game. It can do simulacrums, it can do 6 waves of rewards on simulacrums, wave 30, it can do all the Uber bosses, every single one of the Uber bosses, it can do deep delving, it can literally do everything in the game. So this is what I like to call a well-rounded beast of a build. All right, so that's going to be linked in the description for those who want to see some of his bossing clips. I'll have a compilation link there. And I'll also be linking his leveling video. As you can see, a 3 hour and 39 Act 10 Ckaiba. Now, this is a pretty old run, but for the most part, nothing's changed. The only thing is this league, specifically, they did nerf, or they are nerfing Spectral Helix, so the leveling might be a little bit more tedious. But Spectral Helix was so strong on this build during leveling, like incredibly strong, that I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. You might just have to update your weapon a little bit more often. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, let's head into the actual POB because I've made a pretty cracked POB for you guys for this build. Put a lot of time into it, and it's as good as it gets. All right, so first off, we're going to look at the Lvling Trees. So you're going to see that you have a full Lvling tree as always. So, you start with Brutus, Merveil, Val over Soul. So we're going to start off with leveling with a two-hander, but I'll talk about that once we head into the notes. And then we're essentially going to move forward. And the idea when I made this POB is that I made it so it would literally use 0 regrets. Not a single regret is going to be required to swap into the leveling build into the actual General Cry endgame build. Not even one regret. Just the ones that you get for free during leveling are going to be enough, and I made sure of that. All right, so yeah, you're gonna have trees that are basically different levels of budget, different levels while leveling, all that good stuff. Now let's look at the skills. Once again, I've made different setups, so you can see the default setup with Ichimonji. Then once you head over to Paradoxica with no Asenats being the gloves for Explodey, and then once you do get Asenats, and then your end game setup, so you'll be able to easily follow along that. Now note that it is somewhat important which skill gems are going where because of the gloves. Now the gloves are going to give you trigger level 10 Assassin's Mark when you hit a rare, unique, or enemy. If you do not have the mana available, it's not going to trigger. So that's why we put life tap inside the gloves. So the actual Assassin's Mark is going to be linked to life tap, and so will our leaf slime. This is very, very important. And another thing that's important is we're also going to be using blood and sand in the gloves. But this, because these are auras, we do not want this to be linked with life tap. So your gloves are going to need two links, a 2 link for life tap and leaf slam, which are going to be for the Assassin's Mark, and then a blood and sand and dread banner that are not linked to life tap. So that's very, very important. Otherwise, the build will literally not work because you're going to try to reserve your life, as if you will. All right. Now, in terms of the items, these are pretty specific. So what I would recommend you do is essentially go through the leveling, and we're going to talk about that in a minute and through the notes. Go through the leveling as you normally would, and then probably around level 60 or so, head over to Heist and do some endless heisting for a while until you're able to afford every single one of the items on this list, because they're kind of mandatory to make the build actually feel good. If you don't have all of this, it's probably not going to feel amazing. So either you're going to have to endless heist. That's probably what I would do, because you can endless heist around late level 60s right before going into maps. It's really good for chaos recipe. These are pretty cheap items. Ichimonji 510 chaos, red blade banner is the big expensive item. Last league on the first day, it was about 50C, but I've also seen it being like 2x before the divine swap. So this is like the big thing, and I would probably not swap into the proper General Cryblade Flurry setup before I get this. Abyss is just a few chaos, Oscar a few chaos, and Praxis, same thing, not very expensive there. Now, the thing about Praxis, however, is they are removing Replica Conqueror's efficiency, which was a really good source of minus mana cost for a lot of builds. So a lot of those builds are going to probably need to go into Praxis. But I don't think that's actually too big of a deal, because you weren't really getting Replica Conquerors on the first day of the league anyway, so I don't think it's really going to affect the price of Praxis too much. But you may not be able to get like a -8. You might have to settle for like a -7, but that's plenty. But yeah, -7 or -8 on the mana cost on Praxis is going to be a massive deal in the early stages of the game to take care of your mana problems. But once you get this, mana is no longer an issue, and this is going to carry you until you get access to Elrion Jewelry, because of course I'm not going to put Elrion Jewelry on like a day one setup. That wouldn't make any sense. It's not available, right? All right, so that's kind of what we're looking for. All the super, super cheap stuff. Very, very basic stuff here. Next, we're going to go into Paradoxica with no Asnats. So if I go into the actual tree here, Paradoxica swap, and I put it on the tree around level 86. So once again, you're going to basically make all the currency in order to get the mandatory items to swap into the proper General Cryblade Flurry setup around level 60 or so. And at level 68 on the tree, there is a tree called Swap to Ichimonji. This is the baseline tree for General Cry. And then what you're going to want to do is basically progress through your Atlas or whatever farming strategy you want to do. And I figured that around level 86, you should have enough currency to swap into the Paradoxica setup. So there's a tree called level 86 Paradoxica swap. And you'll see there's a few things that changes. Not a whole lot, but essentially we're adding another cluster. We're grabbing the Brutal Restraint for Second Sight, which is pretty important once we get to Paradoxica set up. And I think we're also changing their Ascendancy. I don't remember exactly. But essentially not much changes here, except we get a Paradoxica. Still Red Blade Banner, still Abyssus, still the same sort of rares. I did throw in a Raislotha at this point, and of course the clusters. We don't really have clusters on the level 68 setup with Ichimonji. I think I started including clusters around level 75. And yeah, this is our no Asnats, because we're essentially still running Oscarm. And this is pretty cheap. Now, you'll see once again, you'll have pretty much the exact same in terms of the links, but be sure to check it out, because again, it's very, very important. For example, if your precision is not level 4 on the Paradoxica setup, you might run into some mana issues, right? While on the Ichimonji setup, I believe that precision is level 12. Now, why is that? Because of course, Ichimonji has, mana reservation efficiency. So it's very important that you pay close attention to the actual level of the gems and the gem setups and where they are, where I actually put them in the build. All right, so that's going to be that. Next, we're going to go into Paradoxical with Asenats, and of course, this is going to come along a new tree as well, I believe. Nope, not even actually. Still Paradoxical swap on the tree at level 86. But let's say by the time that you get that, you'll be around level 91. So essentially, from 86 to 91, we're just focusing on adding more defenses to the build. We're basically grabbing all of this and some other defensive stuff. So for the most part, not too much of a difference. And then we're going to go with Asenats. Now, Asenats are essentially what make this build. It takes this build from like probably like a B plus tier to like an S plus tier. Once you put these on, everything changes. Like everything changes. It's pretty insane how much of a difference these gloves make on this build. But for the most part, we're still rocking Paradoxica, still rocking Redblade, Abyssus, Ryslatha, and just some regular rares. And again, at this point, we are going to be having the Elrion modifier for the channeling and non-channeling. It's very important that we have 2 non-channeling and 1 channeling. The channeling is for our cycloning, because we're cycloning to proc Desecrate. This is how we actually use General Cry. And then the non-channeling is for the General Cry itself and every one of the other buffs that we have, because basically our mana on this build, it's very, very, very important that you have your mana cost dialed in. Now, we do help Alira on this build, and because we help Alira, we're going to get a decent amount of flat mana regen. So as you can see, this costs 9 mana, but I have like 18 mana regen, which means by default, I'm pretty much going to be good on mana, because I'm still going to be, like most of my skills are going to be free, if you will, right? Because the General Cry is going to cost 9 mana, and that's going to be on a pretty short cooldown. But everything else is essentially free. The totems are free, Blood Rage, Berserk, all of that is essentially free because of the minus 14 that we get from the Elrion craft. All right, now at this point, at level 91 on the tree, I also included a Watcher's Eye. But you can see, so the Paradoxica setup in the level 91 here, you can see that there's actually 2 empty jewel sockets. Now, why did I put 2 empty jewel sockets? Simply put, you can kind of do whatever you want with these sockets, based on what you're missing. You'll see that a lot of this PoB does not have the required attributes, and it has no resistances. And the reason for that is because the rares are just blank, right? I did not put resistances. I did not put attributes. So if you see here, we're missing like 80 dexterity, right? Well, you just get a ring with like 40 and another maybe 40 on your amulet or your whatever else, right? And then this is how you would fix your attributes pretty easily. And of course, the open jewels are also there for exactly that. Fix your resistance, fix your attributes. All right, and then we also are going to finally have the end game setup, which is where we start including, awakened gems and stuff like that. And then we have 2 different end game setups. We have an end game setup for clearing. So if you intend to farm things like, for example, simulacrums or just maps in general, delving, you'll want to go with this. And then we also have a pure DPS setup, which is an extra like 20-30% DPS or something like that. And essentially what changes that we go back to Oscarm, but at this point we're starting to look into some juicy corruptions for damage like vulnerability and attacks crit and stuff like that. And this is the setup that I would use for example, if you wanted to farm Eldritch bosses or Uber Maven or something like that. Meanwhile, if you wanted to say farm Feared because you have to do the Chayula Bridgestones and the Cortexes, I would focus on the Clear Focus setup instead. And then, of course, we also have an endgame tree at level 95. Once again, nothing much changes here, but we go into a double cluster setup at this point, I believe. And then we also have an endgame juice tree where we once again add another cluster for the last few levels on this build. And the funny thing is this build is actually quite tanky, right? A lot of people think that this build is very squishy, but it's because they play it wrong. To prove this point, you can actually head over to PoE Ninja and check this out. If you go into builds and then you go into the first day of last league, you can see that the highest level was around 95. These are mostly group players, right? But you can see our friend Ckaiba on Berserker was... Where is he? Well, actually, that's weird enough. I don't see his profile anymore. I'm not sure what happened there. Or maybe it's not Kalandra, actually. Maybe it's Sentinel. Let's see. Yeah, as you can see, there's a lot of these. Yeah, this is him, I believe. Yeah, I'm bot Asher Feminist. As you can see, he was level 87 on day 1, which is, pretty good. Then on day 2, he was level 90, which is, again, pretty good. On day 3, he was 95, right? So as you can see, this build could easily push past level 90 if played properly without needing to, go into some leveling runs or anything like that. It's just mostly going to come down to your playstyle. If you play it well, and of course, if you want to learn how to play it well, I'm going to link some of his content in the description so you can check that out, because it's a melee build, but it's played as a ranged build. It's almost kind of like a totem build. You don't actually want to play in melee range other than when you want to go get your 20 blitz stack for single target. All right, now that's pretty much it. We're going to finish off the video by talking about the actual notes. This is where you're going to get the bulk of the leveling and all the important things. So you'll see that essentially there's the full leveling guide, right? The links when you swap them, all that good stuff. I like to put that in the notes so you can easily follow along. And what's going to be really important is this right here, because they are nerfing Spectral Helix. Spectral Helix is going to be a little bit weaker, and you're probably going to want to be updating or upgrading your weapon more often during your leveling to make it smooth. The last time I leveled this build, I pretty much kept the white weapon the entire run, and I just pick up one off the ground, and it was my new one, and that's it. But this time around, you'll definitely want to make sure that you do the recipe, which is a weapon of any rarity, a blacksmith whetstone, and a rustic stash, which is magic or rare. Doesn't matter too much which one, if you go with a magic or a rare. But that's essentially what you're going to want to do. And you're going to want to do this starting from probably around a bastard sword, then do it again on a two-handed sword, and then an edge-grade sword. And around level 30, we're going to start using axes. So the reason why we don't use axes early on is that we actually want the accuracy, right? This build struggles with accuracy early on. So by using swords, we can get the 40% accuracy implicit, which is a big deal. And there's actually no reason to use axes until we get to this point on the tree where we get Hatchet Master, because at this point, we're actually going to be getting Onslaught, and we're going to be getting axe nodes, right? So this is the point where we're going to swap into axes, and as you can see, this is around level 30. And the first axe that I recommend using is the Shadow Axe at 33. So you'll get to the point where you have the nodes for it on your tree, then you'll swap into the axes, and then the leveling is going to be really nice from there on. But even before that, it feels really good. Now, I do want to answer a question I'm sure I'm going to have a lot of people asking. What about Hyrri's Truth, right? Hyrri's Truth was buffed. They added more dexterity to it, and this build does lack a lot of dexterity. It's hard to get as much dex as you need for Paradoxica. And also, they added some more multi. They doubled it, I believe. The reason why we cannot use this is because of mana cost. It simply is too expensive to run a level 30 precision, even if the amulet gives us precision, has 100% increased mana reservation efficiency. It is simply too expensive to run, while the actual endgame setup uses like a level 12 or something. Or actually, I ended up using a level 20 because of this node over here that we do get on the tree. But yeah, it's too expensive to use level 30. For example, you can see that my unreserved mana here is 41. If I put this at level 30, however, the mana cost goes to 12, right? So I would still be able to run that, but that's with a level 4 Enlighten, which is not exactly cheap. Another reason for it is because amulets, rare amulets, can offer a lot of damage and also a lot of good quality of life. And because we need 3 minus mana costs, right? We absolutely need channeling minus mana cost, and we need 2 of the non-channeling, because it's absolutely 100% mandatory. The build pretty much doesn't function if you don't have that, unless you have a Mage Blood, because then you can do the reduced mana cost shenanigans with the flasks. But other than if you had a Mage Blood, you literally need those 3. So that's why I'm going with a Turquoise Amulet. It's a really good place to also get Chaos Resistance. You can get additional attributes that you need. You can get life. So overall, I just think that a rare amulet, after considering it for a while, is better than Hyrri's Truth. And also, you never really know the price that uniques are going to be, but Hyrri's Truth is typically a pretty cheap one. But anyways, that's pretty much it for this build guide. Again, all the links necessary for you to check out this build are going to be in the description. And yeah, I really think that this is honestly a better version of even my previous General Cry that I made a while ago. I've been theory crafting this build, and also Ckaiba has been doing a lot of testing over the last like 8 leagues of playing it, and his insight was really really nice in terms of making this POB and whatnot. So check him out as well, and that'll be Matthew signing out until the next one. Peace.